I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. I am now going to continue my reading in the Doctrine and Covenants. The last thing we read, Section 106, was the calling of Warren Cowdery as a stake president over the area of Freedom, New York. That was in November of 1834. Now, the construction of the Kirtland Temple had begun in 1833, but due to the financial state of the church, the work progressed fairly slowly, and it stopped altogether during the time of Zion's camp. But once the men returned from Zion's camp, the work began to progress in earnest. And in October, it really started picking up with Joseph Smith leading the work. Come to the spring of 1835, the foundation, I believe, is complete, and a good portion of the main structure is already built, though it will not be completed until that fall. In February of 1835, the 12 apostles are called and ordained by the 3 witnesses. And shortly after that, the first Quorum of 70 are called. Now, that brings us to Section 107. And the heading to Section 107 states, Revelation on Priesthood, given through Joseph Smith the Prophet at Kirtland, Ohio, dated March 8, 1835, recorded in History of the Church, Volume 2, pages 209 to 217. On the date named, the 12 met in council, confessing their individual weaknesses and shortcomings, expressing repentance and seeking the further guidance of the Lord. They were about to separate on missions to districts assigned. Although portions of this section were received on the date named, the historical records affirm that various parts were received at sundry times, some as early as November of 1831. As to the date of this revelation, according to the History of the Church, written by Joseph Smith, and this is a footnote put in by the historian, I believe, B.H. Roberts, who edited and got this printed. He states that verses 1 through 58 were the revelation given at this time. Everything after verse 58 are those things that were revealed at sundry times before this. And as far as I can tell, we don't know exactly when these were revealed, but they are put here by the prophet Joseph Smith, so this is where I'm going to read them. But it is a long section, so we're going to read that first 58 verses first. Then we're going to read the rest of the section as a separate video. As to the historical context here, this was, as it says, this was a conference of the 12. This is a little over a month after they were ordained and organized, and they confessed their sins, they asked forgiveness both of God and the first presidency, and then requested of Joseph Smith to inquire of the Lord for them. Now, shortly before this, there was another conference in which it was agreed, where Joseph Smith talked to them about what their duties were, and it was agreed that they would travel throughout the eastern states, primarily in New York. They then set up a schedule of conferences to be held throughout the eastern countries, so that the 12 would pair up, go 2 by 2 throughout the countries, but they would meet up in specific places for a conference at various times. There was, May 2nd, May 9th, 17th, 22nd, all through. They're going to go through like 4 or 5 stops in New York, go into Canada, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And so they're going throughout New England and New York and even into Canada. And at each place they're going to have a conference. Now, during these travels is when they will organize the churches in the area. And we will get a direct laying out of the boundaries of Warren Cowdery's stake, where he has been called a stake president over the area of Freedom. And this is when they pass through Freedom, which I believe is scheduled for the 17th of May, they are going to declare what the boundary lines are to be for his area of ministry. And that's the plan going forward. Now, we get this. This is revelation given March 28th. The plan is for them to have their first conference in Kirtland on the 2nd of May, and then go on their missions east. So as they are preparing for these missionary travels, they ask Joseph Smith to inquire of the Lord, and we get section 107. So let us now read. There are in the church two priesthoods, namely the Melchizedek and Aaronic, including the Levitical priesthood. Why the first is called the Melchizedek priesthood is because Melchizedek was such a great high priest. Before his day it was called the holy priesthood after the order of the Son of God. But out of respect or reverence to the name of the Supreme Being, to avoid the too frequent repetition of his name, they, the church, in ancient days, called that priesthood after Melchizedek, or the Melchizedek priesthood. All other authorities or offices in the church are appendages to this priesthood. But there are two divisions or grand heads. One is the Melchizedek priesthood, and the other is the Aaronic or Levitical priesthood. The office of an elder comes under the priesthood of Melchizedek. The Melchizedek priesthood holds the right of presidency and has power and authority over all the offices in the church in all ages of the world to administer in spiritual things. The presidency of the high priesthood after the order of Melchizedek have a right to officiate in all the offices of the church. High priests after the order of the Melchizedek priesthood have a right to officiate in their own standing under the direction of the presidency in administering spiritual things, and also in the office of an elder, priest of the Levitical order, teacher, deacon, and member. An elder has a right to officiate in his stead when the high priest is not present. The high priest and elder are to administer in spiritual things agreeable to the covenants and commandments of the church, and they have a right to officiate in all these offices of the church when there are no higher authorities present. This reads, other revelations have been very much kind of personal, where God is speaking to individuals, but this reads more like a Sunday school lesson, like we're reading from a textbook. And remember, the 12 have just been organized. They're being sent out on their missions. What is their main responsibility being sent out? It is to organize the branches of the church throughout the regions of the eastern countries. Also to open the missionary work in areas that there are no branches. But their primary responsibility right now is to organize the churches. And as time is approaching for them to go and fulfill this duty, they're asking the Lord for guidance. And so God is here. This is God telling them, this is how you're going to organize it. You go out there, you organize these branches under this organization. This is how it works. Now notice the priesthood, the actual name of the priesthood, or the original name, the holy priesthood after the order of the Son of God. This tells us this is God's priesthood. This is not an earthly priesthood. This is the power of heaven. But out of respect to God, we refer to it as the Melchizedek priesthood because Melchizedek was such a great high priest. Let us continue, verse 13. The second priesthood is called the priesthood of Aaron, because it was conferred upon Aaron and his seed throughout all their generations. Why it is called the lesser priesthood is because it is an appendage to the greater, or the Melchizedek priesthood, and has power in administering outward ordinances. The bishopric is the presidency of this priesthood, and holds the keys or authority of the same. No man has a legal right to this office, to hold the keys of this priesthood, except he is a literal descendant of Aaron. But as a high priest of the Melchizedek priesthood has authority to officiate in all the lesser offices, he may officiate in the office of bishop when no literal descendant of Aaron can be found, provided he is called and set apart and ordained unto this power by the hands of the presidency of the Melchizedek priesthood. The power and authority of the higher or Melchizedek priesthood is to hold the keys of all the spiritual blessings of the church, to have the privilege of receiving the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, to have the heavens opened unto them, to commune with the general assembly and church of the firstborn, and to enjoy the communion and presence of God the Father and Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant. The power and authority of the lesser or Aaronic priesthood is to hold the keys of the ministering of angels and to administer in outward ordinances the letter of the gospel, the baptism of repentance for the remission of sins, agreeable to the covenants and commandments. Very important thing is that the Aaronic priesthood is lesser, not because it is not of God, but because it is part or an appendage to the Melchizedek. In other words, the Melchizedek priesthood, that's the full priesthood. Once you're a high priest, you have all the priesthood that you can have. That includes the Aaronic. The Aaronic is lesser because it is contained within the Melchizedek. Both are of God. Now, the Melchizedek priesthood is over spiritual things, but it's also over the mysteries And it is through the Melchizedek priesthood that we have the presence of the Father. Now we can have the presence of the Father. But we also have the General Assembly and Church of the Firstborn. The Church of the Firstborn are those who are exalted. This is showing you the lesser priesthood is the outward ordinances, baptism. Let us continue verse 21. Of necessity there are presidents or presiding officers growing out of or appointed of or from among those who are ordained to the several offices in those two priesthoods. Of the Melchizedek priesthood, 3 presiding high priests, chosen by the body, appointed and ordained to that office, and upheld by the confidence, faith, and prayer of the church, form a quorum of the presidency of the church. The 12 traveling counselors are called to be the 12 apostles, or special witnesses of the name of Christ in all the world, thus differing from other officers in the church in the duties of their calling. And they form a quorum, equal in authority and power to the 3 presidents previously mentioned. The 70 are also called to preach the gospel and to be as special witnesses unto the Gentiles and to all the world, thus differing from other officers in the church in the duties of their calling. And they form a quorum, equal in authority to that of the 12 special witnesses or apostles just named. And every decision made by either of these quorums must be by the unanimous vote of the same. That is, every member in each quorum must be agreed to its decisions in order to make their decisions of the same power or validity one with the other. A majority may form a quorum when circumstances render it impossible to be otherwise. Unless this is the case, their decisions are not entitled to the same blessings which the decisions of a quorum of 3 presidents were anciently, who were ordained after the order of Melchizedek and were righteous and holy men. The decisions of these quorums, or either of them, are to be made in all righteousness and holiness and lowliness of heart, meekness and long-suffering, and in faith and virtue and knowledge, temperance, patience, godliness, brotherly kindness, and charity. Because the promise is, if these things abound in them, they shall not be unfruitful in the knowledge of the Lord. And in case that any decision of these quorums is made in unrighteousness, it may be brought before the General Assembly of the several quorums, which constitute the spiritual authorities of the church. Otherwise, there can be no appeal from their decision. The 12 are a traveling presiding high council to officiate in the name of the Lord under the direction of the presidency of the church, agreeable to the institution of heaven, to build up the church and regulate all the affairs of the same in all nations, first unto the Gentiles, and secondly unto the Jews. The 70 are to act in the name of the Lord under the direction of the 12 or the traveling high council, in building up the church and regulating all the affairs of the same in all nations, first unto the Gentiles, and then to the Jews. The 12 being sent out, holding the keys, to open the door by the proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and first unto the Gentiles and then unto the Jews. The standing high councils at the stakes of Zion form a quorum equal in authority in the affairs of the church in all their decisions to the quorum of the presidency or to the traveling high council. The high council in Zion form a quorum equal in authority in the affairs of the church in all their decisions to the councils of the 12 at the stakes of Zion. It is the duty of the traveling high council to call upon the 70 when they need assistance, to fill the several calls for preaching and administering the gospel instead of any others. So remember that at this time the 12 are preparing to go out and organize the churches. And this is God telling them how to organize, what's supposed to be going on. Now this last portion here is the authority of the various quorums in the church. The 12 apostles, we have the highest quorum is the first presidency. And when they are united, they are the highest authority in the church. But we get all 12 apostles. And if all 12 of them are in perfect agreement, that is equal to the 3. And we take all the 70. If all 70 of them are in perfect agreement with each other, that is equal to either the 12 apostles or the first presidency. So when we're looking at doctrine in the church, I just want to point this out, that if the first presidency says it, we know it's doctrine. If it is declared by the quorum of the 12, it is also doctrine. And if you ever get a document, I don't know if there exists one, where you have all members of the quorum of the 70. And when I mean the quorum of the 70, this would be the first quorum of the 70. It wouldn't be the other quorums. The other quorums are of lesser authority. The first quorum of the 70 is equal in authority to the 12 apostles if all 70 are in perfect agreement. But if there is one person who does not agree with the decision, it does not have the same authority as the 12 apostles. And if one of the 12 apostles is not in perfect agreement, it does not have the same authority as the first presidency. You will also note that the local high councils, it says they are equal in authority to the traveling high council. This is not exactly what it means, in that they have the authority. When they make a decision, it is the decision of the church. But their decision, as was revealed in a previous revelation, their decisions can be appealed to the 12 apostles. The 12 apostles can overrule the local high councils. Now, those high councils are still considered the decision of the church unless the 12 apostles overrule them. But there is that appeal process. Now, it does also give us this appeal process that if one of the quorum makes a decision in unrighteousness, that they can make an appeal to the General Assembly of the several quorums, which constitute the spiritual authorities of the church. Now, what this isn't talking about gathering all the members. This is talking about gathering the general authorities. So if the 12 apostles render a decision, and then somebody else says, we don't think that's proper, we think that was done in unrighteousness, you can then gather the first presidency and the quorum of the 70 to review the decision of the 12 apostles and either uphold it or repeal it. So if somebody thought that any one of these three quorums, the first presidency, the 12 apostles, or the 70, if they thought that the quorum made a decision in unrighteousness, they could appeal to the other quorums of the general authorities. Now, of course, that's never happened, and I doubt it ever will, but God is here putting it in place that it can be done, that we can make these appeals. But I know I said I was going to read the first 58 verses, but this is already getting way too long, so I'm going to leave it here, and we will read the next verses 40 to 58 in the next video, and then have a third video to finish out the section. So I will see you there.